It's great to be in Madrid today, and I'm going to talk today about the professional mind in times of uncertainty and why we should all think like entrepreneurs. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you my story, because I think my story, a bit of my life story, my professional life story, will help you better understand my message today. So, what is my story? All right, well, my story goes back quite a few years, 1968. This is me in 1968. Now, unfortunately, my parents didn't have digital cameras in 1968. So even though I was selling lemonade outside of my home in Los Angeles, California at the time, there was no way for me to bring that picture to you today. But this was pretty much me. I was a quiet guy, pretty shy, and selling lemonade is what really gave me a little bit of excitement sometimes, because it allowed me to meet people. I made new friends. Most kids this age today are probably playing Call of Duty with Xbox. But this is what it was like in 1968. Now, let me tell you a little more. This is me in 1973. I was 13 years old, and I had a paper route. Now, in America, that's pretty common. I had 3 paper routes. So that means I was delivering the paper in 3 different neighborhoods. And every day at 5:30 in the morning, my mom and I would get up, and she would help me put rubber bands around hundreds of newspapers, and then she would help me load up my bag, and I would go out there and deliver the paper. So I was a bit of an entrepreneur. I made about $50 a month doing this. So let's continue. During the ages of 18 to 24, I was a bit of an introvert, okay? I continued being a pretty shy guy. Now, growing up in America and going to college in America, you would think that I had a pretty good time in university, right? Well, no. I had a pretty boring time in university. I mean, I loved what I was studying. Look what I was studying, mathematics. I got a BA in mathematics at Boston University. But I was a quiet guy. I continued being very quiet, very introverted. I didn't party. I didn't date a lot. And I did my master's courses in computer science. And then I got a job as a database programmer. So what's the 4-letter word that probably best describes me as an individual? I was a nerd. But you know what? I was proud of being a nerd. I was such a nerd. I'll never forget, when I was 16 years old, my girlfriend left me. And do you know what she said to me? She said, "Paris, you're too predictable." My friends, they all have boyfriends that cheat on them, that, they lie to them, sometimes they hit them, all kinds of stuff. But you're like so linear. You're too predictable. I mean, I was so predictable that when I would bring home a girl, my parents used to they fall in love with the girl before I fell in love with the girl. And the mothers of the girls would fall in love with me before the girls fell in love with me. That's how predictable I was. So something happened. I was 24 years old, and a very good friend of mine called me from New York City and he said, "Paris, I want you to come and join my firm, but on one condition, that you do my training program." Now, his training program was called the Invisible Fish Selling Training Program, which meant that if you could get it done, you could sell invisible fish. I had to learn to sell on the phone and face-to-face during 6 months. He paid me $3,000 a month to do that. But let me tell you, he forced me out of my comfort zone every day, several times a day. I had 3 nervous breakdowns. My father wanted to throw me out of the family. I cried probably once a week. It was terrible. But I kept going because I realized that I was too much of a nerd and I needed to break out professionally. And I did. I broke out so much that I was out of my comfort zone, coming in, coming out, and finally I went completely out. All of a sudden, my comfort zone professionally was not small. It was flat. It was like the world. I felt comfortable doing just about anything. I embraced ambiguity. I loved ambiguity. I loved it so much that I spent 20 years in investment banking. 20 years of my life I spent in investment banking after that. So I was doing deals and selling things, and my mind was completely open professionally. And then, one day, I turned 42. And you know what? All of a sudden that day, I don't know if you guys know London, but in London, usually at 4:30 in the afternoon, it's raining and dark. And I was standing there outside my office one day, looking outside, and I said to myself, you know what? I'm not happy here. I've got to do something. And almost like out of the blue, I get this call from a Japanese investor that says to me, Paris, I got a problem. I need to find a Spanish soccer team to come to Japan to play 3 games. Can you find me somebody to do this for me? And I thought to myself, soccer? What is that? It's a game. I mean, in the States, we don't really play soccer a lot, so I was a little confused, but still, you know, I thought, soccer? Games in Japan? Well, let me tell you, that night, I could not sleep because I thought to myself, is this a calling? Is this like my opportunity to break out of this place? So in the morning, I said to my wife, honey, I'm leaving the bank. And she said, oh, really? Where are you going? Goldman Sachs? Morgan Stanley? No. I'm going to become a sports marketing professional. She looked at me and said, what have you been smoking? I said, nothing. Well, what did you drink? Nothing. I'm just not passionate about what I'm doing anymore. I mean, when I joined this bank, I knew I was joining the second oldest profession in the world. Now it's starting to feel like the oldest profession in the world. So I got to get out. So sure enough, the rest is history. In 2004, I took the Valencia Football Club to Japan. My company did, my little startup. And it was the most successful preseason you can imagine. We did such a great job that in 2005 and 2007, this gringo nerd investment banker took Barcelona to Japan. Look at the smile on me there. Am I alive? I wasn't smiling like that at the bank. Do you see me smiling now? I love what I do now. I teach. But I was smiling there. And like Simon Sinek says, it's not about what you do. It's about why you do what you do. And that smile shows why you're doing something, because you feel alive. You're passionate about something. So after that, I did 5 startups. Some did well, some didn't. Then I started working on my PhD. And today, I'm in the academic world. I'm an associate dean and a professor of entrepreneurship. And guess what? I am smiling. I am enjoying what I'm doing. I taught 3 classes before coming here today. That's why my voice is a little bit gone. So, let me tell you about what I did for research, okay? Because I got my PhD last year. As if I wasn't busy, last year I got my PhD. How's that? Any PhDs here? No. All right, well, let me tell you what I did for my PhD. I decided to study quants, okay? Now, what do I call a quant? I studied quants in many types of organizations, all right? Now, what is a quant? Check out these definitions, because I'll be asking you guys out there, do we have any quants here? But see if you can relate to any of these. You don't like leaving your professional comfort zone. How many of you would like to be here right now talking in TED? That's leaving your comfort zone for some of you, maybe. Struggle with ambiguity. How many of you love ambiguity? Embrace it. Mathematically minded, I'm sure there's a few here. Obsessed with objectivity. Believe that more information means more certainty. That you might have a fairly closed mind. That you struggle in negotiations. Probably half of you here are quants, professionally. Well, let me tell you, the world is full of quants. There's nothing wrong with being a quant. Now, a lot of people ask me, how do you start being a quant? Think about this now. How many of you here are quants? How many of you are wearing intellectual blinders? Do you experiment every day? Do you move out of your professional comfort zone? Well, do you think people are born quants? That's me when I was born, but that's not really me because they didn't have cameras back then. But this is probably what I looked like. A real quant. Now let me tell you, my sister, she wasn't a quant at all. The comfort zone for her was everywhere. You know, God bless my parents, but they gave her such a hard time They used to tell her every day, "Can't you be like your brother? He's so predictable. He always brings home these nice girls. He doesn't party." I was the nerd in the family. She was partying all the time. I mean, you can tell. Look at this picture. She was born stoned. No, she was born happy there. Her comfort zone was like everywhere. So, what do you like? See, what's interesting is that in some countries and some cultures, people have very big personal comfort zones. Like here in Spain, for example. People here, they could party all night. They could probably do, if I ask someone here, let's go and party in Africa for 3 days, probably 300 people will sign up. Now, if I tell you, let's speak in English in TED in front of 300 people, your comfort zone all of a sudden is very small, your professional one. But your personal one's pretty big. Well, in most of the world, it's your personal comfort zone that's small. And it's your professional one that is the one that needs to grow. So, what am I trying to tell you all today? My main message is that you do not need to change as a person to open your mind professionally. A lot of people believe you do. Let me give you an example. I was in Silicon Valley last year, and I was with a professor of Stanford University, and he said to me, "Paris, but doesn't a person need to change as a person?" I said, well, let me give you an example. Take this professor here, which he knew very well. This guy was a nerd when he was growing up. He has a PhD in engineering. If you put him today in front of 50 people, a room like this, he will sell them invisible fish. Now, if you put that same guy in a discotheque with 50 women, how many women do you think he'll pick up by the end of the night? Not one. So what does that mean? It means he hasn't come out of his personal comfort zone. He's still in there. But he's completely come out of his professional one. I'm an exact case. I mean, no, I think I could pick up more than 0, probably pick up a couple of them. But my comfort zone is very small. I hate ambiguity. I hate it. My wife knows it. She can tell you. She's Spanish, and she sometimes has a hard time because she says that I'm too direct. Well, it's not that I'm American, and that's why I'm direct. It's because I'm a nerd as a person. So I am direct. I don't like ambiguity. I don't want to experiment. You're never going to see me walking in here with a purple skirt and an earring. That's not going to happen. So this is an important message. This is a picture of me last week in Tokyo. I was talking to a couple hundred people, and all of a sudden, at the end of my talk, 5 people came up to me and said, "Professor, we are Quants. We are proud of being Quants." I said, "Good. But what can we do to open our professional minds?" Well, I said, the first thing you can do is come and listen to TED Talks, because it's about ideas. But there's so much you can do. You can get an MBA. You can go and stay in another country for a few months. But believe me, and I speak a lot in Asia now, this is a common problem in Asia. People don't want to change as a person, but they want to change professionally. Now, let me tell you, I'm not trying to tell you you shouldn't change as a person. Because if you start going out of your personal comfort zone, you will grow in many different ways. But some of us can't. We're just too nerdy to do that. But if you can, and you can do both, there's probably a lot of people that were speaking here today that can help you with that. So, quoting Kiyosaki here, the next 10 years are going to be vicious in terms of change. Vicious. I mean, the volatility that we're going to see and the world-changing events are going to be incredible. So unless we are prepared to deal more with the unknown than with the known, we are going to struggle. The companies of today, using the words of Jim Collins in The Great by Choice, he talks about the 10Xers, and he talks about these people who have this productive paranoia, that have this empirical creativity, that are disciplined. These are the people that want to be hired today by companies. I was at Google and Zynga last year, and they both said to me the same thing. We want to hire analytical people who can experiment, think out of the box, and communicate. So, in closing, I want to tell you a couple quick stories. This is one of my idols. And one of the things that I love about him is that he was so obsessed with the idea that we should not settle. Let me tell you a quick story. About 3 years ago, I was in Hawaii on vacation. And we went to church like sometimes we go to church. We go to church a lot, but that day we went to church, and sure enough, the priest there then that day had a lot to say. He was looking around during the sermon. And during the sermon, I usually just hang out and just, meditate or something. But he could tell that day that everybody was not listening to him. So the priest started saying, "Hello?" And everybody was paying attention. So he said, "I've got a question for you all. I want to know, when you die, how many of you want to go to heaven?" My wife looked at me and said, "What do we say?" "Of course we want to go to heaven. We're in church." "Okay, so how many want to go to heaven?" So everybody raised their hand. Great. So the priest pretended he was getting a phone call. He picked up his phone and he said, okay. And then he went back and he said, "Do you know who that was?" "That was God." And guess what? He's got a special deal for you today. Remember all those sins you did, all that partying, all that kind of stuff? Well, God has a special deal. He wants to know how many of you want to go to heaven right now. Come on. My wife was like, "What do we say?" I said, "Forget it." There was this little old lady sitting in the front, about 88 years old. Nobody raised their hand. You could hear a pin drop in that church that day. Little old lady sitting in the front. The priest looked at her and said, "Ma'am, are you ready to go to heaven?" And she looked at that priest and said, "Father, I have a lot to live." And that father smiled from end to end. And he came back to the podium and he said, "Let me give you a piece of advice. I'm not going to convince you to listen to my sermons, but let me give you a piece of advice. When you are about to die someday, you're not going to regret the things you've done on this earth. You're going to regret what you haven't done. So go out there and live your lives." When I heard that day, I said to myself, that is exactly how I felt that day when I was in London watching those clouds at 4:30 in the afternoon, dark. I felt I wasn't alive, and I felt that I wasn't going to regret the things I'd done, but the things I hadn't done if I didn't get out of there like pronto. And that's what I did. So find your passion. Life is too short to not have a passion professionally. You've got to find it, and you've got to step out of your comfort zone every day so that you can develop that passion. And I'm going to end with a few words that Steve Jobs said to John Sculley. John Sculley was the president of PepsiCo at the time, and Steve Jobs was trying to hire him. He was president of Pepsi, John Sculley, so he didn't want to go anywhere. Well, finally, Steve Jobs went out to see him to New York City. And he went to his house, and they were having dinner. And at the end of the night, after, John had saying all night that, "Steve, I don't want to join Apple, I don't want to join Apple," finally Steve looked at John in the eyes and said, "Let me ask you a question, John. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water? Or do you want to change the world?" Deep, huh? Well, John Sculley joined Apple soon thereafter. Now, I don't think any of you here are going to change the world. I can tell you I'm not going to change the world. But I tell you one thing, it will change your life to continuously thrive, to go out and step out of your professional comfort zone. Because the times that are coming are going to be tough. And the only way to differentiate yourself is to get out of that professional comfort zone. Because it's by doing those things that you will start to think like an entrepreneur. Experiment. Thinking out of the box. In today's economy, few of us are going to be entrepreneurs. Very few people. Because that takes going out of your personal comfort zone. But everybody needs to think like an entrepreneur. Because the times that are coming are going to be tough. So, please, I know you've heard it a lot, but life is too short. I'm 52 years old, and I don't have any regrets. And you know what? I'm smiling.